All right, we'll go ahead and get started. David, who normally runs this meeting, is out this week on a well-deserved vacation. So I'll be taking the reins today. Let's see. First up on the agenda is designated note taker. Could I have a volunteer for someone to help take notes today?
I can take notes.
Thank you, Frankie. Any new faces? Are there folks on the call today who haven't been here previously who'd like to introduce themselves?
Hi, everyone. This is my first time at these meetings. I'm Thomas. I'm a software architect. And yeah, user of Buildpacks and big fan of Paketo. Hi, everyone.
Awesome, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, then first up here on the agenda, review outstanding RFCs. I know we have a lot this week. These have been piling up. Let's, I guess, start here at the bottom. This Quarkus build pack one, I'm not sure we've talked about this regularly. Does anyone know what the state of this is?
I think there were a lot of questions and some threads here, and my main request was to move more of the information that's in the linked implementation repo and in some of these threads into the RFC itself, sort of for posterity. So I don't know where others are at, but in my mind, the big questions here are less about like concerns about the plan or the implementation, but more about getting the RFC into a state where it's a good document for the future.
Okay. And there hasn't been any progress on that front?
I know Dan said that he was going to reach out directly to the Buildpack author, but I have not talked to him since he said that, and he's out today.
Okay. Cool. We can follow up with Dan. Let's see. Next up here, contributes RFC for health checker build pack.
I can give a status on this too. Dan and I were going back and forth in some of these comments, and we took some time to talk it through synchronously. And Dan is working on updates to add more details around the interface of the health checker itself, and to provide ways to configure it at runtime in case you're, changing the port at runtime or something like that. You'll need to configure the health checker to match.
Okay. Looking forward to that. Support for Yarn Berry.
Yeah, sorry, there hasn't been much movement on this week. No big updates here.
Okay.
I know, Tim, you're planning on making some larger changes to this. Is that right?
Yeah, that is the plan.
I was wondering if you'd mind just throwing a comment in the RFC, sort of like with just your intention, like I'm going to change X things just so people know what state it's in, and like if it's not ready for more review now, maybe we could like draft it and then undraft it when it's ready.
Got you. Yeah, I could do that.
I think that would be nice. I think someone did recently comment and ask. Yeah, it looks like Emily. Yeah, some folks care about the status of this one, so getting an update would help.
Yep, will do.
All right, and then the 800-pound gorilla in the room, dependency management RFC. What's going on here?
So I saw that, Ryan, you approved the overview, and then phase 3 has been approved, and then phase 1 and 2, which are like the most important ones, don't have any approvals yet. I think I've addressed almost all of the comments on there. Emily, if you have a chance to take another look and just see if you're happy with the changes. I also spoke to Dan about, I think there was an open question that we discussed about we want to reduce inconsistencies across the Java and non-Java build packs. And I was trying to find out like what their buy-in level would be on the Java side. And it sounds like it would be high, and he is happy with the overall idea that we've proposed here, and might take a while to transition over for the Java build packs. But all in all, they would like to see like a shared GitHub action and workflow approach so that they don't have to maintain all their own pipelines related to dependencies. So it sounds like on his end, like they're bought in and they're fine with the proposal. And then we'll just have to work together to see what it will actually look like to implement on their end. But I think that's a good sign. And that was like one of the main things I was waiting for, to see if we could move forward with an implementation. So I guess if you are one of the people who's tagged as a reviewer on any of these, just like take another look through and make sure all your concerns are addressed. And yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. Sort of getting everything standardized was my big concern. So I wanted to hear from Java. I had some like lingering worry because I had seen a draft of an RFC that Dan was working on that was about sort of like kicking dependencies out of Buildpack TOML into like a separate build pack or separately configurable thing that sort of ties into, some of the flexibility we've wanted in configuring build packs. And I had some high level concerns, just like, are we sure these two things will fit together if we want to do both of them? But if you talk to Dan and he's feeling good about it, and I'm not super in the details of either, so I feel like that was, the big thing I wanted to check on.
He shared like a very draft level proposal to do something like you're describing, and I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but he didn't seem like too concerned about that when we talked. But I should definitely take a look at that and make sure. But I think that is that like an idea to like move away from having any dependencies listed out in Buildpack TOML in general.
Yeah, so one of the ideas in that proposal, and I'm sorry, I would link it here, but I don't have it, but I know Dan is looking to share it publicly, so we're not hiding it from the broader community. He's not here and I don't have the link right now. But one of the ideas would be like maybe in let's say you have a meta build pack, the first build pack in the order could actually just provide a configuration of the metadata of all the dependencies for all the downstream build packs. And that would give folks one place where they could change things if they wanted to without changing every build pack. It could also allow you to do things like, if we added some sort of platform feature, it's like, oh, the platform hooks in a description of what stuff it wants, then that build pack could be like, oh, I'm going to use the platform one. It sort of like gives you one place where you can change these things instead of rebuilding the whole tree if you want to configure them. It felt like a step in the right direction to me, but like I was worried it might fight with the idea of sort of moving the ownership of each dependency into each repo.
Okay, yeah. I definitely need to take a look at that proposal and see. It definitely would. I mean, I don't know if we wanted to kick this down the road. I think that it would probably take a while for us to come to an agreement about moving to this new state. And I don't want to just like go ahead and do what I've outlined if we're going to eventually move that way. But I also don't want to block our efforts in this area on like coming to a consensus on like a completely new way of doing things. So I don't really know how to balance those two concerns. But I do think they are kind of like competing ideas.
I think there's enough complexity here that might be worth just like getting anyone who's interested into a special deep dive meeting that's just like Dependency Fest 2022. I'd be curious what we could do, like, because we don't want to block some of this important stuff on an overhaul. I was also sort of curious about, like, in our current system, like, what is stopping us from what would need to be done? What would be the minimal thing we could do to sort of roll out more stack support and meet our goals without doing the whole refactor first? But yeah, we can talk about that all in the same place. I think I'm not really pushing too hard in any one of these directions. Just want to make sure that we're not gonna like thrash and do a bunch of one thing and then a bunch of another, or that we're not parking some of the really practical stuff. Like this stuff should support Jammy behind a hard to resolve larger architecture question.
Yeah, I think that it definitely warrants a deeper conversation. For what it's worth, I had really big concerns with making any changes to the dep server that would allow us to support different, versions of dependencies. And since then, we've put in a couple PRs just to make like quick fixes to, I think, get like .NET Core working and potentially Go. And it wasn't as bad as I thought, but I would still really like to avoid going too far of adding all these like stopgap solutions in the dep server. And we ran into a situation the other day where like I think like pip or pip-end, the dependency hadn't been like uploaded in like a week. And I personally, as a dependencies maintainer, didn't really know like what the problem was or how to fix it. And it just kind of like, because I'm a dependencies maintainer, just kind of laid broken until like we found the right people to work on it. And I just really want to get away from that model as quickly as possible because these types of issues keep happening. So I would like to avoid the situation we're in and like just trying to make things work for the urgency of stacks. But again, I don't fully know the details of Dan's proposal, and I think we should have a conversation and see how we could possibly get these things to fit together.
Okay. Yeah, I also have not seen this. I think I have thoughts on it that, yeah, we should all bring up in kind of a more common dependencies focused meeting. All right, moving on from there.
Wait, sorry, before we move on, when I take notes, I can't leave an action item hanging. It's like against my personal values. So who is going to set up this synchronous meeting?
I can set it up. I
Okay,
can reach
cool.
out to Dan. He's out right now, but I'll figure it out.
Thanks.
All right, next up here is a new feature checklist.
I just saw some new activity on this like an hour ago. I haven't had a chance to go into address it asynchronously. I don't know. Emily, I think the last two are from you. Do you have anything that you want addressed synchronously and I can go back later, or do you just want me to hit these up asynchronously and call it a day?
Yeah, if I just give a high level summary, I like the idea of a checklist that helps us, make sure everything gets out, but I want to be careful about sort of different personas and making the right checklist for different personas, because I don't want to give, contributors the impression that they're responsible for sort of like merging and releasing some of these things all the way through to get it out. So it's sort of like, what is the maintainer's checklist before this is done? And then like, as a contributor, how far do I have to take it? What's my handoff point? Or, stuff like that. I was sort of worried that I wouldn't know how to use this checklist as is, or that it wasn't clear which people it applied to or which it didn't.
Yeah, I wrote this broadly because as a maintainer, I often forget the pipeline that I have to follow in order to make sure that not only have I added a feature, that it is exposed, well documented, easy to access, all those sort of things, right? So I definitely came at it from a bit more of that mindset. I'm not entirely sure the best way of breaking that up in that case then, because I think that there are a couple of points that are like optionally handoff points and nice to haves and that sort of thing. So I don't know if this is meant to go into something like a contributing.md, which is sort of meant to be more like of a generic contribution guide for the whole project. I guess I don't know what persona would be the best one to go into that, in your opinion?
I think it also could be written from a perspective where like you just outline who is responsible for each of the steps. Like you're describing how new features get into a build pack and get out to users. And I think it's worthwhile to have all of those things together, describing the full process, but you need to outline who is responsible for what those things are. So like it does, to me, it does make sense to have it all in one place, but it is confusing possibly in the way that it's written, that, you know, a user won't have the ability to say secure a release of the build pack, right? A maintainer or contributor has to be able to do that. So just saying that like at this point, a contributor or maintainer will cut a release of a build pack to tell you that like that is what's happening. I think
like,
that that's still useful.
the most crude thing that I could think to do is at each step talk about the potential, the people that have the potential to perform that step, right? So like proposing a new feature, anyone can propose a new feature. Writing a new feature, anyone can write a new feature. Setting up, you know, X tracking issue, anyone can do that. But like potentially marking, maybe like in somehow in the subsection, basically saying like this subsection, it can only be performed by maintainers, or this one can only be performed by maintainers or contributors, or something like that. Just going out, like even if I were to tag each step with who was capable of doing that or who was expected to do that, that would be better.
I think that would help a lot to address my concerns.
Okay.
I mean, maybe it makes sense to have the same process just documented from both points of view, right? You have the entire thing, and then you in contributor, but saying that like 90% of those steps are like some maintainer is going to handle for you, but at least telling them how the process works. And then we don't have, I don't think, like a maintaining.md, right? Where we could maybe outline like you're a maintainer, like how do you go about the process of say accepting a new feature contribution? And this may be written from that perspective. I don't know. I feel like I'm talking in circles now.
If you put that in the same document and clearly mark who's responsible for what, that might make it actually easier also for contributors to know that the process is kind of stuck. They can't do anything more. They just have to wait for maintainers to take something over. So it makes sense to have that in a single place, I guess, unless you can otherwise make this transparent with two separate lists. But I guess that's going to be screwed up in a matter of weeks or months if you have that in separate documents. So I guess it makes sense. And it also makes sense to clearly mark it. On the other hand side, I mean, yeah, sure, secure a release of a build pack. What should I do as a contributor, right? Some of those points are very clear, like that they can't be meant to be the responsibility of a contributor. But marking that clearly is, I think, better than separating it into separate documents.
I think that's fair. I think it's maybe the thing we don't need here is a checklist, and instead we need something that describes the process. And so you could have like a little bit more detail. Yeah, like something that just says, you know, like then the release of an implementation, and like what does that mean? Who's responsible for those things? It's kind of hard to articulate in a bulleted checklist. You just don't have that much space to say all of those things. You could maybe give yourself some more room to articulate the context in which each of these things apply.
Sounds like a great opportunity to try out the mermaid support that GitHub has included recently. I think flowchart is one of the diagrams mermaid supports. And yeah, then you could still have a maintainers checklist, right? To make sure that, yeah, there is a release of the build pack before we start putting documentation on some side. But then is actually a list for maintainers, I guess, just to make sure everything is checked off.
So what I'm hearing is it might be helpful to have two artifacts, which is one to keep a new feature checklist for the kind of express purpose that I wanted, which is when I'm a maintainer, I want to make sure that I have all of the things, all my ducks in an order before I check, okay, this feature is done. I want to make sure that I have the documentation in place, the samples in place. I want to make sure that I've gotten it all to the artifacts that I need to, all that sort of stuff. But maybe what needs to be generated is another artifact that says like, hey, here are the different life cycles of a feature, right? So let's say it's like a really simple feature. Maybe all you need to do is open an issue, open a PR, and then because it's so simple, it doesn't need to be, it needs to just be documented and that's it. And then you maybe go through more complicated features and see the different layers that you need to interact with. Sounds like it kind of just needs to be a separate artifact. I can look at it doing that.
Awesome. Up next here, we have remove dep and dep ensure build packs.
I have all green arrows on this. Or green check marks, not arrows, whatever.
Yeah, I think dep has been deprecated in the Go community for a number of years now. It's probably safe for us to go ahead and say we're going to remove it. And even then, I think we're going to take a very cautious path. So this seems pretty reasonable. Yeah, so I think with Forrest and myself and Frankie, I think that covers quorum on the Go maintainers end of the spectrum. Okay, I think this is like in a mergeable state, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay, I think we'll get this merged after this meeting. Next up is this .NET Core remote debugging support. I don't think that there's been any forward progress on this. Oh, I got a couple of approvals today. I think this is in like a workable state. All the folks I know of who use .NET Core and advocate for it, who I'm in contact with, have basically signed off on this verbally to me. So I guess I'm kind of proxy voting for them to say like they seem to think that this is sane. Just waiting, I guess, for quorum from .NET maintainers.
I mostly was hoping to see an answer from like the person I don't remember the username. This person like made a point about like an implementation choice, and I wasn't really clear on what the sort of user story would be for that type of feature, and I was hoping to get an answer, but I think it's easy for us to implement without what's being proposed there and then change that later if it ends up being easier for users. So I'd be happy to approve without that.
I mean, even if this were suggested as a thing, I don't see why a user couldn't override ASP.NET Core environment dynamically at build time. So like, I just don't see anything in the comment that's like blocking anything we would do.
Agreed.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, if this, like, I'll approve it, and then there might just be some shouting into the void on this PR as that gets like further discussed.
That's fair. Okay, sounds good. This one, Python dependencies. I can't remember if this is a real RFC or if this was accidentally undrafted.
I think it was accidentally undrafted.
Okay, well, let's skip over this. Josh isn't here, I don't think, today anyway. So next up, we have proposed to add open telemetry support for Java.
Yeah, I created that RFC. I saw some comments. I replied to them. A couple of them are regarding the an example, like providing an example in the samples repository, and I can work on that once this is past the first release, I guess. And then also the other comment from Emily today regarding supporting configuration via file. I think that's a great idea, so I can work on that. and update the RFC accordingly. I don't know if you have any comments or other inputs to improve it.
I'm excited about this. I think it looks great. The only thing I think we need to figure out is how we'll handle secret configuration. Because if we only accept it, via environment variables or files baked into the image, it won't be treated with enough care in a lot of environments, and that's not great. But if we just use our binding workflow that we've used in other places, I think that'll work great.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea also, like besides secrets, to make it more convenient. If you have a lot of custom configuration, then it might be tedious to use environment variables. So a configuration file can be better. Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else on this one?
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, this looks like it's maybe the last one today. RFC to publish images to ECR.
I have not gotten back to addressing these comments. Yes, Frankie, I agree. We should just use the new tags. Just blindly ported the old ones without double checking, but I can update that.
I have a small conversation at the bottom here around discussing potentially putting in some form of like criteria for IaaSes that we would want to serve or registries that we would want to serve, because it's Paketo is meant to be a gender or a vendor neutral project. God, escape me for me. And so like I'm all fine to support like putting things on different registries for different IaaSes if that makes them faster, but like I don't want to run into a situation where we're having to support an unsupportable number of IaaSes because we've said we're going to do it for this use case. So having some form of metric or like basically checklist to basically say, hey, you actually don't hit these metrics, we can't, reasonably support your registry to make sure that we're just not overburdening ourselves or our resources, I think is something that I'd really want.
I think that's reasonable. It's definitely going to be a case by case situation. I think that there's like maybe the canonical example I can think of is like, so this, and Emily, you're closer to this, so like correct me if I have some of the context here wrong, but the primary reason we want to do this is to support Buildpacks as a build target in this like app runner thing that is an AWS product. And my understanding in that case is that Paketo Buildpacks would be like the default Buildpack implementation that's provided by this like app runner functionality. That's different, I think, than say Google's build product that Google has their own set of Buildpacks. People can secondarily opt into Paketo as a build thing that runs on top of Google's build infrastructure. But it maybe doesn't make sense for us to push first class images into GCR, even though we are like historically, ignore that for a moment. But maybe it does for ECR. Thinking about it from the standpoint of like, we're doing this because that platform is using Paketo as like a default. And so we're kind of like holding up our end of the joint kind of venture between those two things. Versus what maybe is in Google, which is like Google has their own Buildpacks and they've chosen to use those as the defaults. Now, if they were to change, obviously like there could probably be a different conversation where we say like it does make sense for us to push as aggressively as possible out to Google's registries to support that particular like joint venture between the project and that particular platform.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Is there not also like built-in functionality to use like to build and run images on is AKS? Is that Azure's Kubernetes service?
It's like an Azure DevOps tool
and-
that I think supports Buildpacks.
Do
What?
we know what they use as their default Buildpack set?
No, we can look into it. My general thought here was like, if people are asking us for this one, we can start with the one that people are asking us for, whereas I haven't heard as much requests for the other major cloud providers. I'm open to a world where in the future we want to do all the major cloud providers, and then you can sort of get into a question about what cloud providers are major. Is Alibaba Cloud a major cloud? It is in some circles. Do those people use is there a need for Buildpacks there? What fraction of people that are actually using Paketo Buildpacks are using them in these different major cloud providers? But I sort of wanted to just start with the easy win. It's like people want this one. Let's do it. Let's see how it goes. And then we can expand if it's super successful, or we have requests for other clouds and the prices are reasonable. I feel like we're always going to have to do the cost benefit analysis for each one, because the costs will change on each cloud and the benefits will change on each cloud based on what number of users we think we would reach there and how expensive it is.
I mean, with the particular reasoning that just came up, it's also a question like if AWS has a product using that, it shouldn't be any problem at all for them to actually like pull the images instead of requesting Paketo to push them, including who pays for it, right? They could just host them for their build service. I mean, I wouldn't try to block or veto or whatever to provide that if users request it, but I actually thought it was kind of meant for, there was some people using it on AWS and seeking to get some benefits there. Like, other than that, yeah, I mean, I don't see a particular reason why Paketo should actually push them there for a product that they have, but
it was just for that
thought.
product. I think it might feel different, but it would work for anything running in that cloud. I guess my concern is around us owning the best namespace for Paketo Buildpacks, and like if someone would be relocating Paketo Buildpacks, which is I think probably what would happen if we didn't do it, then is some other organization becoming the default provider of Paketo Buildpacks in this situation. Like, what are they naming them? Is there risk to our brand reputation or security if they push other stuff to that same namespace? I kind of want to like, maybe in addition to this, even if we're not pushing to other clouds, I sort of want to lock down the place we would push to all the major clouds so that we sort of own the story of Paketo as a project in all of the major cloud providers, whether or not we're choosing to use it.
But that makes all the, whatever major means, but all the major cloud providers as potential targets. I think that is the difference again, right? If we say, yeah, we actually strive for doing that, to publish that to the major providers, and we define what major means on whatever our terms are for that, right? Sounds good, I think. But that would probably add Azure as well, right?
Yeah, Azure and GCP seem like the easy ones if you're starting with major.
Yeah, but GCP is already, right? Or would you consider moving over to Artifact Registry, like the newer thing? It's now on GCR, I don't know.
Probably would. I think we just have the stuff that's on GCR because it's there as like a legacy of we did this in the past, and we still haven't gotten to a point where we're going to like break that contract. But if we were to say the reason we want stuff hosted on Google's cloud is intentionally to like make it something that's first class available in their cloud with like the advantages that come with that, then I agree with you. Like, we should use what even Google is saying is going to be like the future of their container registry.
Oh, by the way, what kind of account do we have on Docker Hub? So how do we run into API rate limits?
It's a it's grandfathered into the Cloud Foundry Foundation's open
Okay.
source project, like write out or carve out, I guess.
So theoretically, we don't. Every now and then we get a complaint, but we can't reproduce the behavior. It's actually been an ongoing point of discussion.
I think I've seen a rate limiting as well in the past. I'm not sure though.
Please let us know if you run into
Yeah.
it.
I'll do.
Every time someone mentions it, I go and look personally. And I think Dan McCusa does the same, and we're never
He
able
set
to
up a
replicate
test
it.
to show.
Right. It might
Yeah.
might still be. I've also seen rate limitings from Google and GitHub for all those that come from our CIDR range, I guess. So it might be on that side, right? That they were rate limiting us too many Docker pulls from SAP facilities or something like that. So maybe it was not the rate limiting from the provider side, so to say.
So am I hearing that people would prefer this if it was all the major clouds? Or maybe we could say the intention is to eventually do all the major clouds, but we're going to roll out one and, you know, see what it costs and like what the usage is.
It's like it's not that unlikely that we will actually change the consumption to be taken from our pull-through proxies. So, and we have pull-through proxies for GCR and Docker Hub. So.
I love the idea of doing all the major clouds. I was trying to put up a minimal thing that we could try first that I thought would be broadly acceptable, but I'm happy to go maximalist if that's what the people want.
I mean, doing that on concrete requests sounds reasonable. Like if there's nobody interested in having that on Azure, then why go for it, right?
I agree with that. I think the thing that I care about the most that comes out of this is our ability to maybe reach a new audience of folks who are using a product like the Amazon product that's proposed here. Introduce them to Buildpacks, get them possibly involved in the community like that, I think is my primary focus. And if the trade-off here is we spend a little bit on pushing images to ECR, I think that maybe is a reasonable trade-off. All right. I'm not really sure what the action item is here, Emily. Sorry. Do you know what the action item is?
I might update it to say that we should at least claim our namespaces on Azure, even if we're not pushing there right away. And that we are very open to expanding to other major cloud providers if we can get a signal that there would be consumers. I think that's in keeping sort of with the spirit of what we've said here, but without committing to, you know, doing all of it right away.
Great. See if we can get the CFF to give us an Azure account. I'm sure they can. All right. I think that brings us to the finish on RFCs here. And next up, we have CNB updates and questions. I don't know if there's anything here on this front.
I got one, which is there is a proposal to deprecate a lot of older APIs in the lifecycle. So anything older than 06, there'll be a long deprecation window. But these APIs have been around for more than a year, and it's a huge maintenance burden on the lifecycle team. So they're hoping to start the process of winding them down. So I think that would be relevant to this whole group of people. I'm not sure what APIs are using across the board, but moving to newer ones before they start putting deprecation warnings might be nice. But that's not getting like released imminently or anything. It's just an early heads up. And then even when the life cycle is released with those deprecated, there'll be plenty of time before they're actually removed.
Cool. I think it's worth checking, but I feel like most of the build packs I've seen are at least on 07.
I sent something in the Paketo Slack about this the other day. I don't remember which channel it was in, or I just did like a quick heuristic where I searched the build pack tomls for those numbers, and I came out with a list of ones that would be impacted. I can see if I can dig that up and repost. I don't know, where would be a good accessible place to put that?
Core dev in the Paketo
Cool.
Slack.
I'll do that.
Either that or issues in the repos directly, maybe.
Yeah.
Great point.
All right. Last item here is project updates. The only update I can think of is this morning, Emily and I went and spoke with the Cloud Foundry Technical Oversight Committee about Paketo Buildpacks. Their questions are mostly about what does our roadmap look like? How is interaction with the community going? How are his contributions? Those kinds of things. I think at the end, there were a couple of questions about stuff like, could we possibly see Paketo in Cloud Foundry itself at some point in the future? I think this is an ongoing topic that has continued to burble in the background for folks who are working on and care about Cloud Foundry itself as a platform. We didn't promise anything, but I think we said that Paketo would be interested in helping the folks who would need to do the work to enable that, to kind of understand the parts of the system they would need to implement, and we could help them figure out what that looks like. But that, because of the nature of the separation between the build packs themselves and the platform and the life cycle, as kind of articulated in the CMB specification, the vast majority of the work is on the platform end of the spectrum, which would be things that impact the Cloud Foundry platform itself and not actually the build packs. So yeah, overall a really good meeting. I think they were happy to see that we're doing some more to articulate a roadmap, and they were interested to see the things that were on the roadmap for 2022.
I just chucked onto that list Nginx and HTTPD layer SBOMs. The layer style SBOM support has been added to Nginx and HTTPD, I think as of their most recent releases. So if that's something that you were looking into to make sure that you have the SBOM information around what version of Nginx or HTTPD you have installed, that should be available to you if you are running with the latest versions of those build packs.
That brings me to a question, like not related to Nginx or HTTP at all, but SBOM. I think there is an ongoing RFC in Buildpacks to have SBOMs for stacks. And on the other hand side, I think we have either plans or have already done something, like Frankie worked on that, I think, to have actually in Cyclone DX or SPDX format for our stacks already. Like, is there any chance to do something that is already machine readable, shipped with the stacks, and like potentially in the format that is likely to come out of the RFC, to already have like kind of full image SBOMs available?
It's definitely
I think that would be great, even
conversation.
if that would be that non-standard, because the RFC is not done yet. But
yeah, at one point we felt really optimistic about what we thought that format would be, and like have a configurable way to add those files to the base image. And then there were a bunch of concerns on the CMB side, especially because these SBOMs can fall. I think the concerns fall into two buckets. One is more like philosophical, which is our strategy of doing things in layers in the image is a little hacky.
Mhm.
But we're already doing that for at least some of the things. So I don't know if that would be blocking on its own. But the other concern is how this SBOM stuff works as we're releasing the much anticipated Docker files feature, which allows for dynamic extensions. Like, would they be out of date at that point? And I think concerns there sort of ended up blocking the conversation, and we're moving forward, getting the Dockerfile stuff done before coming back to that. But I agree the state it's in is not great. If you're trying to just, build a build pack and then copy down the files and scan them, you get a bunch of things that tell you you're missing an important part of your image, and that's really ugly, right? But until that gets worked out on the CMB side, I feel like the best we could do is with Paketo tooling. It'd be like, get the SBOM that we can get from CMB and also grab this other file that we put at a location we know about. Be like Paketo SBOM download in our own CLI or something like that. Which doesn't feel great. I would have much rather have it solved upstream, but if that's not happening anytime soon, and it seems like it's not, maybe that is something we should discuss.
Where do we have that? Do we put that just as a recipe in the GitHub repos, or where do we actually store the SBOM information about these stacks that we have?
Right now, excuse me, right now the SBOM information is attached to each release artifact in GitHub. That's one place that you can get it. It's machine readable and accessible. Like if you use like the GHCLI or something like that, it's easy to like programmatically grab the one that you want. There's also a script in the repo for the stack that will generate it for you on the fly. So like if you have the OCI images, it will generate it for you. Right now they're not baked into the image for reasons of like the sort of complexity that comes up where, like when do you scan it and then you change it after, right? But there is, I don't know, Ryan, I know you suggested adding that functionality to Jam. I was curious, when you suggest that, were you thinking that Jam Create Stack would just generate like a sidecar file the way it does now, or do something fancier where it ends up inside the image?
So there's in Jam Create Stack, there is the implementation of that RFC that was outlined in the CMB project. It's hidden behind like an undocumented environment variable because of the fact that it was never actually approved. The hope was that it would be approved and then we could just remove the feature flag and enable it. And then basically that whole RFC has just kind of died. So the code is all there. You're welcome to use it. It's hidden behind an experimental environment variable. I can link you to the line of code that will actually enable it. It's this experimental attach run image SBOM. But basically, at the end of the day, all that's going to do is just it generates an SBOM and it attaches CycloneDX, SPDX, SIFT format JSON files in a particular location on the file system. And it just conforms to basically what was outlined in that original RFC. Again, I like re-emphasize the experimental nature of this and the fact that it was never approved by the CMB project. And so at some point in the future, when there is like an actual approved implementation, we would likely remove this code and replace it with whatever the approved implementation is. But for now, it's there.
Yep. I take that link and we'll have a look, but it might even be already enough to just take it from the release asset. And just take it from there for our use cases. Thanks.
CMB isn't going to do it anytime soon, and they're doing a bunch of stuff, and it seems like they won't. Maybe we should polish up our version of it. It's like Paketo specific story around getting the full SBOM, you know, even if I think a lot of times we have features in Paketo that we think could eventually be great upstream features, but we try them out first here with our special workflows. Maybe this would be a case where, depending on how much work it is, it's something we could polish up for users. Just throwing it out there. I'm not saying like we're going to decide that right now, but
I think that's fine. I think we already had for a long time, and it still exists in the Bionic stacks. There's like a metadata that gets attached to that image that's like a Paketo specific SBOM output. So there's like V2 of Paketo specific SBOM output. Yeah. I think the major concern there just tends to be, how do we iterate on that going forward, right? If we commit to something, how long do we have to go about supporting that particular format, and where? And we were able, luckily, to start to drop support for the V1 of the Paketo SBOM format, because we had this switch over from Bionic to Jammy, and so Jammy no longer has the like old SBOM format in it. But Jammy itself is going to be supported for another, 4 years or something like that. So it's a long support window.
I think it's right to be cautious there. Like, if there is eventually some standard coming up, then this is definitely some burden to take it on. On the other hand side, I'm not sure, like the actual layer SBOMs don't really bring too much, right? If you don't have the full image SBOM, you anyway still have to somehow scan the image for content, and then but anyway, I do agree that there is a high risk of a maintenance burden. On the other hand side, it might be actually quite attractive in terms of which Buildpack implementation do I choose. Maybe the one that does have full image SBOM support and not the others. But yeah, I don't know if that is a selling point worth doing that.
Fair enough. All right, folks. We're in the last few minutes here. Any other project updates or anything else that folks wanted to bring up here in the end? It doesn't sound like it. All right, then. That's the end of the working group meeting. We'll see you all here again next week.